ADPN's Climate Action Platform was launched last year at ADPN's conference, and over 200 of our members have shown interest in climate-related topics. The overall vision of Climate Action Platform is to unlock capital in a more targeted and effective manner into climate solutions. The platform engages with climate leaders and potential investors to find new and impactful ways to move this capital. We also share best practices, experiences, insights, and solutions through our website, webinars, roundtables, and events on climate. We are also delighted to introduce our gender platform that provides leading practitioners representing philanthropy, corporates, investors, intermediaries, among others, to learn from each other and find more cross-cutting opportunities. Our session today is one such example. In today's session, we will provide delegates with an insight to understand the current state of gender and climate finance ecosystem and explore the perspectives of climate funders and gender-lens investors and the rationale for linking the two to identify opportunities for gender equality throughout climate investments. We will be commencing shortly, but before we kick off our session, I'd like to highlight a few features in this room to keep our conversations lively. To start, please make sure that you're using the app version of Adobe Connect and not the browser version to have the best user experience. If you have not downloaded the Adobe Connect app, please click on ADPN's Help Desk, the link sharing box on the bottom left. There will be full instructions on how to download the Adobe Connect app for different devices. If at any point you get disconnected or have a bad connection, try to log out of the app and then log back in. Or if you're using the browser, refresh the page. Ensure that you are not running other programs in the background. Hopefully, this will improve the situation. Please note that this session will be recorded and you will be able to access the recording from conference.adpn.asia in the next 24 hours or so. You'll also have seen the community chat box earlier. I've asked everyone to introduce yourself. We advise you not to use this chat box to surface any technical questions. If you have any questions for the speakers in relation to this session, we will be holding a Q&A for you to do so at the end. Feel free to type your questions in the Q&A pod, and we will convey these questions to our speakers. Due to time constraints, the speakers may not be able to respond to all the questions. If you take a look at the bottom of the screen, we also have provided you with reading materials that you can download or refer to. These will be displayed at the last screen at the end of the session as well. These are WOCAN Gender Services for Climate Solutions, the W+ standard white paper, the Women and Climate Impact Fund. We've also shared a short broadcast with you. You can also find the links to our Climate Action Platform and Gender Platform. And now I'd like to introduce you to our moderator, Jeanette Guru, Executive Director and Founder, Women Organizing for Change in Agriculture and Natural Resource Management. Jeanette, the floor is all yours. Please switch on your camera and your microphone.
Thanks so much, Prachi, and welcome to all of you who are attending this panel. I would like to very briefly introduce this panel and WOCAN, the organization, my organization that is supporting this. WOCAN is a global international network of about 1,350 members in 113 countries. All of us are experts in natural resource management and agriculture with strong commitment to gender in these areas as well. Okay, so just to say that thank you very much, Prachi, for the introduction, and welcome to all that you're attending this panel. We started this panel because the COVID-19 pandemic gives us a glimpse of how climate change is going to affect all of us and points to the need to build back better to promote resiliency for the health of the people as well as the planet. But in order to be effective and transformative, climate action must promote gender equality. And funders that identify climate change as a critical focus of their investments can achieve social and environmental and financial returns with a gender focus. So the aim of this session is to share the perspectives of both climate funders and gender lens investors and their rationale for linking those two, and also to describe a few investments that achieve both gender and climate outcomes through discussions with investors and funders for those areas. So today we have a stellar panel of speakers who are both funders and investors in both the gender and climate spaces, who are going to enlighten us about why they have decided to fund first from 1, a gender approach, 2, a climate approach, and 3, both approaches. So we'll jump right into the speakers, and I would like to first introduce our gender first speaker, who is Virginia Tan. She's the founding partner of Teja Ventures, and she loves tech. And she has been building an ecosystem to support women in technology using venture capital to support the she economy. So Virginia, I would like to first, first of all, I will introduce all the speakers. Our climate first speaker is Joanna Messing. She's the executive director of the Growald Family Fund. Joanna is a leader in venture philanthropy and social enterprise development, and she serves in a very vital role as convener of funders and NGOs in climate sectors. Katie Turner of Meta is the senior director within the global programs leading their own strategic direction and business development across Asia Pacific and other parts of the world to further Meta's work in blended finance, gender lens investing, gender smart technical assistance, and the gender environment nexus. But before we hear from them, we would first like to hear from you. So we'd like to have an idea of who's in the room, and we've got 3 quick polls that we would like you to answer. So could we activate the first poll, please? Thank you very much for those polls. See, what we can see is the main focus of the work is a pretty big split. A lot of you in the room have neither a climate action nor gender lens investment experience, and that's fine, that's wonderful. So we're seeing really, as you can see across the board, many gender equality people and many climate action supporters as well. Okay, thank you very much. Can we close those? Okay. So now, with no further ado, I would like to turn to the speakers. We would first like to hear from Virginia Tan. And can you tell us, Virginia, what is your organization's engagement in gender lens investments? And what drives your interest in this topic? What are your assumptions behind your approach?
Thank you, Jeanette. A very good morning to everybody here at AVPN today. I'm delighted to be here. Teja is an early stage gender lens venture capital fund for emerging Asia. We invest in companies with the greatest potential to create positive ecosystem change for women. And we believe that technology is the key to unlocking a lot of that impact. We invest mostly in Southeast Asia. Our main focus market is in Indonesia, but we also have exposure to India, China, and other Southeast Asian markets. What we like to do is we invest early. We're very often the very first institutional investor, and we partner. We're very happy to partner with entrepreneurs, so not just being an investor, but actually a partner to entrepreneurs when they're facing the early stages or the early challenges of building a company, and helping them with the sort of the technological transformation to unlock value. What are our assumptions? As a fund, we believe that women are both the biggest drivers as well as biggest beneficiaries of new business models in the internet age. And that is key, actually, to unlocking impact. I think the whole point, when you go into the space and you're trying to balance commercial and sort of commercial returns and impact, I think the key is how do we actually see that impact as central to the business model of the company as opposed to something which is ancillary. And in terms of the verticals that we are investing across, we're looking at everything from supply chains, education, health and wellness, you know, online retail, social selling, etc. And all the investments that we do, you know, we apply one of three gender lenses. The first lens is the diversity lens, which I think most people are familiar with. Either woman founder, woman CEO. Our portfolio is actually mixed, 60% female founders, 40% male founders. So that's only one of the gender lenses that we can employ. The second gender lens that we employ is, you know, we look at companies or technology which are providing a product or service which impact women positively. You know, do they address a gap in the market? Do they address a problem which women solely or disproportionately face? You know, was there no solution before? And the third gender lens that we apply is, you know, does it directly, indirectly, you know, create women empowerment in the wider ecosystem? So I think, you know, when we invest, we look at women as a demographic. We look at companies which leverage women as a demographic. You know, it's not just, I think often I've realized that we need to go beyond just the gender identity of a founder or of an entrepreneur. Look at women as a consumer, as an end beneficiary, as in the supply chain, as online traffic, as a mobile workforce. And I think, you know, I'll be the first to say, you know, in relation to this panel, that climate definitely wasn't on the forefront of my mind. You know, when, you know, all throughout this process of, you know, working on Tasia Ventures and the investments. We've done 10 investments in the last year or so. But I think what's really interesting, you know, is, you know, you start to see women, you know, as a conduit, you know, to affecting sort of greater societal change. And, you know, and that's made me sort of at many times, you know, deepen and reconsider also the gender lens, you know. Are women really just the end? Or really are they a means, you know, to sort of greater ends? And I'd like to give a couple of examples here of investments in our portfolio which are I would say at the intersection of gender and climate. So we have three, you know, in mind. So for example, one of them is a company called Frontier Markets in India. They are basically a rural e-commerce company. So they basically provide, you know, FMCG, white goods to villages in India. And they use women, rural agents, you know, so you can think about it, it's almost like an Avon lady kind of system, but selling white goods to you know, to rural India, you know, women selling to their own villages, so to speak. When we came on, you know, they were completely offline. You know, I insisted that they build a technology. So now you have, you know, thousands of these women agents in rural India armed with smartphones, being able to sell sort of a wider range of goods and services. What's really interesting is that their very first and still one of their top selling sort of SKUs is actually solar torches, because, you know, I don't think they did it just to be environmentally friendly, but they realized that, you know, a lot of rural India is, you know, not connected to the grid. So people actually have spending power, but not necessarily, you know, the infrastructure connected to the grid. So it made sense for them to use solar torches or solar fans, etc. So that's still one of their best-selling products, even during, you know, COVID, so to speak. They use that for harvest. They use it, you know, they use it at home, etc. Another company, you know, which is very interesting company that we invested in recently is Base of Pyramid, sort of a new retail model. So what they're doing is they're using, you know, it's almost like these mobile carts, you know, whether it's like refillable, they sell refillable FMCG. So, you know, you sell detergent or you sell cooking oil, but without the packaging. And how that benefits the Base of Pyramid sort of customers is that obviously when you're buying FMCG in very small amounts, usually they don't buy bottles of soap and shampoo like us, you know, they buy sort of sachets, right? And those are like 30–40% more expensive because you're buying small quantities of them. And of course, when you're doing a refillable model, you know.
Okay, Virginia, can we stop you there? Thank you very much for your examples. I'm sure you could go on and on, but Unfortunately, we only have about 5 minutes per speaker. Now can we turn to Joanna? And the same three questions to Joanna. Please describe Rowold Family Office's engagement in climate projects. What drives your interest in this topic? What assumptions are behind your approach? And you're also linking gender and climate in some of your investments. So please describe an example of a project or an investee that demonstrates how you're doing this.
Great, thank you. And thanks to AVPN for hosting such great participation. So I began with Growald Family Fund with Eileen Rockefeller Growald and her husband Paul since the beginning. And we actually didn't start as a climate foundation. Eileen and Paul had a huge range of issues that they cared about, everything from sustainable agriculture to health to security. And as we started to think about what focus the fund could have and how we could understand the difference and change that we were making in the world, we soon realized that climate was the issue that brought together all the disparate issues that they cared about. And that was, on the one hand, the biggest threat to all of the things that they loved and cared for, and also offered the greatest opportunity to make a difference on those issues. So we focused in on climate very early on and started an approach which we have carried on till today. Similarly to Virginia, we use a venture approach, but what's different is that we are a venture philanthropy, which means that we use grants, and the organizations that we support while they're startup or early stage are nonprofits or social change organizations. We couple the grants that we make with business planning, coaching, mentoring, network support to help them get from an idea through the seed stage to a place where they're ready to scale. We couple that venture philanthropy approach with two other pillars. The first is furthering the field, which is an area where we identify key pieces of research or strategic convening. And we do this because we identified throughout the years that sometimes there are issues that go beyond one single grantee, and where the group together or the field together needs to explore an issue which either helps our individual grantees or sometimes is a source of inspiration for a new organization that we can then support in our portfolio. The third part of our approach is network leadership. Another thing that we realized early on, particularly when we started to work internationally, is that no individual foundation could take on an issue as large as climate change. And so by strategically aligning and coordinating with other funders, we were able to amplify our impact and that of our portfolio. We are currently buffeted by a range of different global forces, which can sometimes seem overwhelming, but the issues that we focus on within climate across the main issues that we see our world facing today. Pollution is one of our focus areas. We see that that has incredible impact, not only for climate, but also we're seeing for COVID, for social justice issues. Finance and financial markets' ability to invest in a climate safe and climate realistic world, movements, and diplomacy are the four areas that we focus in on. We don't have a specific gender lens. However, as an almost entirely female team, we hold gender as a very important value in our grant making and in our approach. I think the example that I will give would be IEFA, which is the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. They are a very, very geeky and data intense organization which provides analytics in the space, which they're run by a woman, and they also have some incredible female experts in a space which tends to be dominated by males. So I think I'll wrap up there. I can answer many questions as they come up, but that's the overview of Growald Family Fund.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Serena. Okay, Katie, over to you. The same three questions. How is your organization engaging in both climate and gender investments? And what drives your interest in this area? And if you could provide us with an example, how you're investing at the nexus of these two.
Great. Thanks, Jeanette. And hello to everyone. It's really nice to be here. This is my first time at AVPN, and I was actually hoping to be there, but this is the next best thing, so hope you're all doing well. I work for MEDA, Mennonite Economic Development Associates, which is a Canadian-based economic development organization that works across Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe, and Latin America. And we focus on business solutions to poverty with a focus on agri-systems. Using a market systems approach, we analyze market gaps and opportunities, and working with local partners, we provide investment and or technical assistance to a range of local entities such as SMEs, farmer co-ops, business associations, and financial institutions. MEDA is quite unique in that as an NGO, impact investment has been part of our DNA since our founding in 1953 when a group of business people made an investment into a dairy in Paraguay, South America. And since then, we've been integrating impact investments into all of our programs, primarily through our own $25 million risk capital fund, but also through partnerships with investment funds and institutional donors in blended finance programs. Our investment approach has evolved over the years, whereas in the early days we invested capital directly into companies in developing markets. Our current approach is to integrate investments into as part of our market systems programming. So for example, we have a program in Nicaragua funded by the Canadian government that is supporting 35,000 women and men smallholder farmers to have improved access to climate smart agriculture technology. And as part of that program, we are supporting women smallholder farmers who grow vegetables, a crop which is very easily impacted by climate change. And as part of this, we're providing approximately $900,000 in loans to two financial institutions and helping them to develop credit lines to assist them to purchase small greenhouses for their vegetable production. In addition to our investment expertise, MEDA has significant experience in gender equality and women's economic empowerment. Women entrepreneurs are the focus of many of our programs, including our current program in Myanmar, which is supporting 25,000 women small-scale rice and vegetable farmers. And we have extensive gender equality strategies in all of our programs. In the past 5 years, we've also begun to focus significantly on gender lens investing, and we are very actively supporting funds and portfolio companies to integrate gender lens into their business models. Particularly given our focus on agri-systems, climate change has been addressed in our programming through supporting climate smart agriculture. We also support companies in the green growth sector in many of our projects. And similar to gender, we have comprehensive environmental strategies in all of our programs. So really, in the past several years, our focus on which was once individual focuses on gender and environment and investment have really culminated to bring together this nexus between gender and the environment, which we do take very seriously. Particularly because we know that climate change is accelerating and that the worst affected are the poorest countries that experience rising sea levels and erratic temperatures. And we know that because of discrimination and gender norms that women and men are impacted differently by climate change. For example, in many of our programs, we see that women are less likely to get credit to buy much needed drought-resistant seeds or small-scale agriculture and are more likely to be allocated lower quality lands. And these are some of the issues that we address in our programming. We also know through our work with businesses and investment funds, particularly through the gender equality mainstreaming framework that MEDA developed a couple of years ago, that the majority of businesses and fund managers in frontier and emerging markets and beyond, in fact, lack both awareness of gender issues as well as the ability to integrate a gender lens into their business operations to promote women's economic empowerment and to address the gendered impacts of climate change. Through our GEM assessments, we've commonly found that companies are gender blind and they're not aware of the business performance improvements that can result from increased gender inclusion, including as it relates to climate change. And on the flip side, we of course know that the nexus of gender and climate finance is growing, and that there's increased demand by investors for funds and SMEs that can demonstrate that they are paying attention to these areas and their connection. And we have seen that helping companies to increase the inclusion of gender and climate into their business models is a de-risking and value-add approach. So I think the example I'll give is a very recent initiative of Meta's. It's called a Gemini. It's a GLI platform that we're currently in the process of launching. Gemini aims to deploy approximately $80 million of investment capital and $80 million of technical assistance funding to accelerate the development impact of Meta's programs across Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Latin America. The fund startup costs are currently being underwritten by USAID, and we're actually partnering with Criterion Institute on this, which is, as you all know, is a leader in GLI. Gemini will identify and develop gender-inclusive solutions to market systems gaps and will strengthen these solutions with investment capital. So for us, the market systems approach is really critical. The fact that we're looking at the entire ecosystem and not just singular investments. And this is based on our learning over the years that enterprise-level finance is effective in helping businesses to grow. However, we feel that more is needed to sustainably grow market systems in which firms operate. So this approach, which is used in Gemini, the market systems approach, where we carry out market systems analysis, we design programs which include technical assistance and investment as appropriate. So for example, investments could be made into a handful of agri-system SMEs such as processors, transport companies, financial services providers. These investees would be screened using a gender and climate lens. Technical assistance on gender and climate would be provided to investees to accelerate development impact, to reduce risk, and to create value for companies. And technical assistance on gender and climate would also be provided to key ecosystem players, such as business associations, farmer co-ops, smaller pre-investment ready SMEs. So we feel that this is a key learning from the programming that we've done over the years, and really will enable us to not only inject investment capital where it's really needed, but also provide technical assistance to a wider range of market systems actors. So I think I'll leave it there. I'm sure I'm just about at my time.
Thank you very much, Katie. It's particularly interesting to hear from your perspective about the challenges and the hurdles that you're finding. And we're going to ask all of you that a similar question in a poll at the end of this session. But now we're ready to open up for question and answers. We've got a few in the panel, but I also have one sent to me this morning that I would like to start off with. This is from Kayleen Alvarez. I think she's probably on the call. Here's what she says. We are a DFAT-funded, gender-forward lending platform for SMEs in Indonesia called BIDUK, which means Investing in Indonesia. We are lending for the unexpected results is that we are getting referrals from more conventional lenders for companies that normally don't need our financing. Subsequently, doubling down on impact both for gender and for climate environment. Her question is this. Given these are such symbiotic, cross-cutting impact sectors, are there any good examples of funds, investors, or metrics looking at both gender and climate in an integrated manner? Most of the tools and frameworks that we've seen still count the number of beneficiaries without really valuing the positive impact for women and climate, or they do so in completely separate outcomes. In other words, is there any way to measure outcomes of those together? Not sure if any of you could handle that. Katie, do you have any ideas about that?
Jeanette, I think you said my name, but unfortunately I wasn't able to hear the question. You were breaking up a lot. I'm not sure if others were able to.
Okay. The question is, are there any good examples of funds, investors, or metrics looking at both gender and climate in an integrated manner?
Hmm.
You can say no if you don't know one.
It's coming to mind. I'm sure there must be some out there. Maybe Virginia or Joanna can help me out here.
Virginia?
Maybe what I'll just add is I think as the field is growing, the level of sophistication or integration is not quite where we hope it would be. But I definitely do know that, for example, MITA has supported a few investment funds in Africa to develop their GLI strategies. And part of their portfolios include renewable energy companies. So I wouldn't say that it's quite intentional for these firms, and I think that's something that MITA has seen in the work that we've done, in terms of companies are interested or funds are interested in this, but the intentionality isn't quite there yet. So this is very similar, something similar that we found with GLI, is that in some cases companies or funds are interested in being proactive, but they haven't actually taken it on, so they haven't been intentional. In other cases, they're gender neutral or gender blind. So I would say the same thing about that nexus, and perhaps it's even less, from what we've seen, it's even less progressive in the fact that level of intentionality isn't quite there yet, even though in some cases it just does happen that GLI funds happen to have renewable energy companies or climate smart agriculture firms in their portfolios.
Okay, thank you. The only other thing I can add is our own WOCON's W Plus standard measures results for women's empowerment along 6 different domains, we call it, which is time, health, leadership, income and assets, education, knowledge, and food security. While none of those are specifically environment or climate related, they can be stacked to a climate reductions unit. So while that unit may be counting carbon, the label that we can attach to it is related to the social impact and the climate benefits. I'm now going to move to Joanna, and she is going to talk to us about her insights about women's leadership.
Thank you. And I actually think this relates a little bit to the previous question, which is, I don't know of a fund that is measuring this on a big level, but there was one question which said, how do you measure the intersection of climate and gender? So I would say that at Global Family Fund, we are a climate foundation, which means that our primary objectives have to do with climate objectives. However, we, in recognition of the intersection between climate and gender, and as a matter of fact, diverse leadership in general, one of the metrics that we track is how many of our grantees are female, the diversity of our leadership, and also we very distinctly, particularly in furthering the field, look for opportunities where we can raise the voices of female and emerging leaders. And we find that that's really critical, not only from an equity perspective, but also from an innovation perspective. As a venture philanthropist, we're always looking for ideas that are breaking out of the box, that are breaking out of the mold, that are different, and that have the potential to have, therefore, outsized impact. And one of the things that we have seen over time is, given that many decision makers are male, many foundations come from Europe and North America, it means that sometimes really, really interesting opportunities are left on the table because the way that the person shows up isn't the way that people are expecting an entrepreneur or a leader to show up. I will tell probably the most dramatic story is one woman leader came to us and started very humbly with, I'm not really sure what my plan is, and I'm not really sure if it's going to work. And then spent the next hour and a half describing exactly how she was going to make an incredible intervention and how exactly it was going to work. But she started very humbly. And I think a lot of times people would have dismissed that because we're so used to the typical male entrepreneur who comes in saying, let me tell you how it's going to go. So I think that's one of the ways that it's really important for us, and one of the ways that we incorporate it into our practice.
Thank you, Joanna. This was wonderful. We've, I think, lost Jeanette, and she should join us shortly. Just out of curiosity for myself as well, how do you think COVID has sort of impacted climate and gender financing for you guys? I mean, moving forward, you see that it is going to have any impact? Sorry, Jeanette, I have to take over.
Sure.
Virginia, would you like to take that question? You're speaking, but could you just switch on your microphone?
Yeah, so maybe I can take the question. Sort of post-COVID, some of the things that we're actually seeing, in terms of the investment world, in terms of the kinds of companies which are being invested in. I think post-COVID, especially here in emerging Asia, we're definitely going to see an acceleration of digitalization. Because what was socially good, sustainable, impactful before has now become necessary and urgent. I think we're seeing a lot more ESG investing, but I think more importantly, what I'm seeing from the ground, which is really interesting, is that our gender lens sort of thesis has actually become countercyclical. I mean, when we launched the fund, obviously we weren't thinking in that way. And I think what we're seeing, what we will see with increasing digitalization, where I see the gender elements sort of pop up is that increasing digitalization will mean democratization of a lot of what I call core needs. For example, ed tech, for example. And I think women are actually disproportionate, or can be disproportionate beneficiaries of that digitalization. I think the way when I look at sort of gender and climate, or gender as a conduit for greater social outcomes, I keep thinking about how we can unlock scale, because I think, first of all, gender has always been seen as a standalone thing. And I have to admit to you, when I built, Acacia Ventures, that was what I was focused on, gender is a standalone thing. But now I'm starting to realize that women are often first adopters of behavior change. And so in the case of climate, if you wanted to affect that behavior change in communities, if you wanted to change consumption to be more, responsible, if you wanted, people to change their behavior habits, you should target the women in the household. But more importantly, I think as an investor, what I'm looking at is actually how do I leverage, technology to be able to scale that impact. So as a hard example, I go back to that example about the mobile carts, and for them to be able to purchase these things, in a cheaper way and also a more environmentally friendly way. And I said, it's just going to be a mobile cart. I'm not going to invest. You need to build the technology. So they're building two types of technology, for example. One is IoT dispenser, so they know at any time sort of who's buying what, in which part of the country. They'll have an app so that big retailers can actually understand. Okay, this is what people are buying in this part of the country. This is what they're not. The environmental impact in this case is I would say, I wouldn't say it's ancillary, because it's at the very heart of the business model, that you're not using plastic, for example. But I just think that post-COVID, we're going to be, what I'm seeing is a greater openness to doing things a different way. And I think what in gender lens investing, when I first started out, to be honest, was seen as a niche of a niche. It was seen as sort of, part of impact investing, which and the beneficiaries were women. Whereas what I'm now seeing is that people are open to gender and hopefully things like climate, because they realize that we have to do things differently. What was socially good before is now becoming necessary. And I think women can be disproportionate beneficiaries of, as we seek to invest to democratize access. Because so many, COVID has shown us there's so many gaps. The world that we live in actually is not really working. I just feel like, when I think as an investor, what I'm trying to educate other investors on as well is actually, when you look at a company, in our case, look at gender, because gender can actually be a huge driving force, right? For revenue and growth in the company, innovation in terms of doing things differently, and in a case like climate, impact as well. You know, if you want to change something, target women. Yeah.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Virginia. We're just losing time. Joanne, I think you'd like to respond to that same question.
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly important question, especially since it's not only COVID, it's also economic impact and also a lot of the social issues that we're seeing around the world. I see a couple of really important intersections right now. One of them is the relation to pollution and climate. With COVID, we've seen the facts that air pollution make the impacts of COVID worse. Things that address pollution tend to also address climate impacts. And so, and also at the same time, we've seen unprecedented clean air in places like India. And so I think one of the questions is, how do we weave together both the understanding and acknowledgement of the impact of pollution on human health, the window that we've seen of what it is to have clean air, and to think together about how do we build back better. And I think that women are at the core of this, because we mothers are thinking about our children and thinking about how do we take care of their health, and in this increasing environment where climate and air pollution are having an increasing impact on our children. I think the final thing that I would say is that what COVID has shown us is the importance of both individual action as well as collective action. We need both if we really are going to build back better. And I think there's a critical role for women, both as investors and philanthropists, in building that vision of the world that we want to see.
Thank you, Joanne. I think that's a great point. I would just like to mention here as well that Wolkan has just now started a new podcast series where we came up with 10 solutions for feminist climate resilient recovery, which I think we've put the link in somewhere, where we talk about things like leadership, how do we compensate women for what they're doing, for not only for their families and communities, but also for the sake of the planet, and how do we link that all into this kind of double, triple storm that we have going on. So I think we need to have more questions. Some of the questions we're getting is, what kind of efforts have been made in advancing knowledge of women and girls in this region in Asia about climate action, and particularly at the base of the pyramid, and how they are empowered to take constructive action for climate action? If any of you wants to, very quickly, we don't have a lot of time left. Anybody wants to talk about specific awareness of climate action? Okay.
I mean, I can speak of a couple of examples. I mean, in South Korea, there is a youth climate action organization, which is, we've all heard of Greta, but also in Korea, there's Forum, who is leading a really powerful Korean youth voice on climate. So that's an example. In India, we have many examples of female leadership, particularly mothers, engaging on clean air. And a lot of these people are coming from all different strata of society, who are acting because of, often because of pollution issues, or hope for the future.
Yes, and I think you had previously mentioned, Joanna, about, or no, it was Katie, about climate smart agriculture. That's another area that I think there's been quite a lot of work done in Asia. The next question was, because gender and climate impacts are often measured differently in the field, is it something that can be combined, or do you expect always some level of stacking? For example, what I mentioned with carbon emissions accounts stacked with gender impacts. I think I can also answer that. No, I think very much we could definitely combine. I mean, as I said, even in our W+ standard, we have something for food security. We could also talk about, and we have one for health. So we're looking at maybe climate impacts in relation to those sectors, but we could certainly expand that. We also look at income changes, income that could be as a result of green growth related investments. But that could also change, and we could definitely find ways to combine two. I think we just haven't had a demand to do so. We would like to see the sector grow, obviously, so we need more of you to come forth and say, yeah, we see this happening. It's just a few minutes left. Do the three of you like to say any last thoughts quickly? We've lost Katie, Joanna, or Virginia. If not, we can just move on to the polls.
I mean, I think in sum, what I would say is, especially given that there were many people in the survey that didn't identify climate as being a priority, I would encourage the consideration of the way that climate can impact the issues that you do care about. The impacts are coming, but it's not only about the story of the negative impact. It's also about the opportunities for investing in the future that we want to see, which offer a range of co-benefits from pollution to land use to women's rights. And so I really encourage people to think about how to employ this in their approach. And I'm very happy to continue the conversation after this event.
Great. Katie, how about you? We lost you for a minute. You're back. Any last thoughts?
Hi, sorry about that. I seem to be having some technical issues. I guess I would echo Joanna in saying that, I mean, women's voice in this issue is so critical, and I think you know, there's many different ways to integrate women's voice into this in terms of developing policies for climate issues. We've also seen that in our work with women and male-female farmers that it's typically the women and the girls who experience the consequences of climate change that are often the leaders in developing effective coping strategies and building resilience. So we've seen that women are often more likely than men to adapt their production practices to be climate smart. So I think, you know, again, with women's contributions in agriculture, which are often overlooked or negated, I think, you know, it's really critical to make sure that you are paying close attention to their involvement and that you're being really, really intentional about integrating that. And for us at META, what we found is that demonstrating the business case for integrating gender and climate into a company's business model is really critical. We found that a lot of companies that we work with, when we start talking about gender, their eyes kind of start glazing over. They don't really understand what it means, but when you start talking to them about the data, about the really hard facts, how it can improve their business performance, that's when they really start to pay attention. So I think being able to clearly demonstrate the business case is so important to helping companies to really pay attention to this really important issue.
That's a very good point. I think there'd be many people on this call who would love to hear more, for us to talk more about that. However, I think we've run out of time. We have to close this question and answers session. So thanks to all of you for your questions as well as the answers. Now we have two more polls we would like to ask you about, and then I will give some closing. Okay. Very much that one seems to be about the lack of understanding of the opportunities. So clearly we need to, I think, create a clearer idea in people's minds of what does this look like, these investable opportunities. And for the second one, what are the 3 recommendations you have to focus within climate and gender solutions? Invest in knowledge sharing, definitely. We're still in the early days of this. Increase and expand climate projects that have a gender equity design element, yes. Create indicators that measure both climate and gender progress. We heard a lot of questions about that on this session. Strengthen girls' and women's capacity. And don't only talk about vulnerability. This is one of my big issues. And strengthen gender expertise in implementing climate change projects. This is something Katie spoke to as well, I think very, very important. Okay, thank you very much for ending those polls and your ideas about this. And then as we're coming to a close, I would like to just wrap this up and say that as you can see from this talk, there's funders who come from very different perspectives to the same conclusion that funding gender and women-focused initiatives for climate action provides unique opportunities to achieve environmental, social, and financial returns However, I have to say this, it should be noted that the current levels of funding at this nexus remain scant, almost non-existent, quite frankly. Though it's been difficult to track, the funding streams for work being done at this intersection have had less than 0.01% of global philanthropic grant money. That was as of 2014. I don't think it's changed hugely since then. And so this is just shocking, jaw-dropping, I think. So we have to talk about increasing the capital available for these types of activities. And to do so at scale requires, as Joanna said, coming together, creating networks and alliances of both climate and gender funders to share, appreciate each group's approach, and to understand these are different approaches very frequently, and to share tools and mechanisms to address the gaps within and challenges within each of those approaches. Climate funders often have limited expertise on how to incorporate gender issues, how to build them into the design of a project. Gender lens investors may have limited knowledge about climate activities, the policies. There are pretty strong now global policies within the climate funds to increase gender awareness, gender responsiveness. Sometimes gender lens investors don't seem to be at all aware of what's gone on in that whole area. And I would say neither one of these groups are adequately supporting the agendas led by women's funds, women's organizations, women-focused social enterprises, and the intermediaries that can channel funds and provide support to initiatives by women themselves. So I would say our call to action is really for funders and investors, whether they be from gender first or climate first approach, to seek outcomes for both climate and gender equality, and for all people involved in climate projects to include women, listen to women's voices and listen to women's decisions, and measure the results of your efforts to improve the status of women and the planet simultaneously. This was well recognized here. And I want to inform you about two new networks that have been formed recently that may be best meeting this call. One is one that's Wokan's involved in setting up called the Funders Group for Gender and Climate Action. And the second one is the Climate Investing Group of the Gender Smart Investing Summit, which I think Susan Beagle may say something more about later in the day. You could learn more about both of those from contacting me, and we could see how to put you in touch with either one of these groups. They're both new groups, and they are increasingly working on finding new mechanisms, finding new partners, building the business case, building the narratives, etc., and sort of building this ecosystem and this community of practice around the nexus of both gender and climate action. So with that, Prachi, I'd like to hand it back to you, and thank you all very much. Thanks to the speakers, and thanks to the audience.
Thank you, everyone, for your time today. Now, with this, we've come to the end of the session on bridging the divide between climate and gender finance. This session was made possible with the kind support of our lead partners, Chandler Foundation, Stockholm Environment Institute, and Udan Prize Foundation, and our knowledge partner, Ford Foundation, and the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, and impact partner, Wokan. To continue chatting with our speakers and fellow delegates in this session, please make sure that you make full use of the ADPN connector. The link may be found in the resource section. Do share your highlights of this session on social media, and remember to tag us at #ADPN2020. The next session is improving outcomes for women and girls across Asia. It will be starting in 1 hour. Thank you. Please enjoy the rest of the conference. Goodbye.